So you want to grow your church, but you haven't received a new member during the pandemic and you don't have a lot of people clamoring to join? What can you do to get that started again? In 42 years of appointed ministry to local churches, I managed to receive over 1,200 new members. That's not a huge number, but considering I was usually sent to churches that had just had some major crisis or calamity, it's not too shabby. How did I do that? Stick around and I'll tell you what worked for me to receive new members. Welcome to Coffee with Coach. I'm Steve Petty. I have 3 goals for these videos: to help you become a better church leader, to save you time and money, to help educate, energize, and motivate you to energize and motivate your church. If you like these videos, I hope you'll subscribe. Click that little red button over there. Let me know that this is something you'd like to hear more of. And I'll be talking more in the future about things that worked for me and answering any questions you have about other issues related to leading your church. So, what did I do to receive new members? Well, first of all, I know you're going to find this really hard to believe, I invited people. I found out the most common way to invite people in that community. Sometimes that was just making sure that I was at the football games and the basketball games and I met new people and invited them to church. And sometimes they would come. Sometimes it meant taking out an ad on the local yellow pages. Don't do that. That doesn't work anymore. Sometimes it meant taking out big splashy ads in the local newspaper. If it was a small paper, I could afford to do that. Christmas, Easter, big ads. Sometimes it meant writing a column in the local newspaper. Sometimes it meant becoming involved in civic events. Sometimes it meant just getting out on the street and meeting people. But I invited them. And I encouraged my congregation to invite them. Sometimes we even printed postcards so that people could invite their friends at Christmas and Easter, and invited people to send them a postcard and tell them, this is the service I'll be at on Easter and Christmas. You'd be surprised how many people came carrying a postcard. So we invited people. The second thing we did was to acknowledge their visits. Now, every community has a different best way to do that. If you're in a very small community, you just might want to drive out to their house and knock on their front door and say hi. If you're in a big town, you might want to send them a letter. I found that in most communities, a first-class letter was rare enough that people were really thrilled to get it. So on church stationery, with a big envelope and a postage stamp, I wrote them a letter and typed it up, made it look good. Today, that's really easy with copiers and printers, but in those days, early days, I had to type them. And I said, glad you came to church. We hope you liked it. We hope you found it warm and friendly. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me and ask. We hope you'll come again. I mean, it was a little bit more flowery than that, but essentially that's what I said. I acknowledged their first visit. I didn't go pound on their doors most of the time. First visits, I think people just want to come and visit and be anonymous, but they do want to be acknowledged. So we made it a point to get their names and addresses at some point during the service, and once we got them, we acknowledged them. We mailed a letter. We also mailed a second-time letter, so if they came a second time a month later, or if they came the second time the next week, we sent them a second-time letter and said, we're so glad you came back. We hope you're finding our services warm and winsome and that you like what we're doing. Here are some other activities that are going on in the life of the church. If you have any questions, please call. If you'd like to call the pastor and talk about joining, feel free to do that. Second letter. We also had a third letter that we sent out to people who visited from out of town, because we discovered that people who visit from out of town usually have relatives in town and they're coming through and they visit. And so we want them to know whenever you're in town, this is your home church. You'd be surprised how many people found that this was their home church when they were here 2-3 times a year, and how many people sent donations at the end of the year because we were their hometown church. Lastly, I would send out a letter to invite them to join the church. After they'd come 3 or 4 times and I felt like they were beginning to feel at home in the church, just a gut feeling, then I would send them a letter and invite them to join. Every church is different for how you have a membership class. If you've got a really small church, You might just meet in their home, talk to them about joining, and receive the family the next week. Talk a little bit about history, talk a little bit about what the church does, talk a little about Methodist theology, and then receive them the next week. Every church is different. If you want to have a 13-week class, go for it. Me, I just wanted them to get in the door. I told them, joining doesn't mean that you know everything. Joining means that you want to be a part of these people and you want to be in this parade. We're going someplace. You can join. Come have fun. You'll learn a lot. And you'll learn in the process of hearing about what we're doing through the sermons and the history lessons that I give you in church. I didn't expect them to know it all. I expected them to want to learn. Come, join the parade. And I would tell them this: don't join until it feels like home. When you walk in the front door on Sunday morning, when it feels like this is home, join, because that's the right time to join. And we had a pretty good record of keeping people in the church because they didn't join until they felt like it was home. So then I made a point to receive people often. I know some churches, you just don't feel like there's anybody going to join, and you maybe only have one membership class a year. Now, I made it a point. I'm going to find somebody that I'm going to invite to join, and I'm going to have a new member join at least every 2 months. Why? If nobody ever joins, new people who attend don't know that there's an avenue to membership. They don't see anybody else join. It doesn't send a good message. But if every few weeks they see somebody join, they go, oh, this is a church that people are feeling good about. This is a church that other people are joining. Maybe we should join too. Just seeing people join encourages other people to join. So I made it a point to try to have a membership class at least every other month. When I had really growing churches, we'd have a membership class every month. Sometimes I only had one person. That's fine. I wanted one person to stand up and say, this is my church. Sometimes we had 15, 20, 30 people joining. That's great too. But the main thing is that on a regular basis, everyone sees new people joining the church. It says to the old members, this is a growing church. I'm happy with what my pastor is doing. It says to new people, this is a growing church. I think I want to be a part of this. If no one ever joins, people go, well, I think this is a dying church. Their pastor isn't inviting anybody. They're not getting anybody to join. There's nothing happening. There's nothing for me here. I'll move on. So I made it a point, receive new members often. I would also have a Sunday reception on the Sunday that they joined. I'd make sure we had special bagels or special donuts or something to say, come out and meet the new family at the coffee and refreshment time. This is who they are. Introduce them all. And then I made sure we had their picture in the church newsletter or the church electronic newsletter, whatever went out. So people saw them joining. And if they missed that Sunday, they saw them in the newsletter and they knew these are the new people and they could greet them the following week. It builds community. It's that simple. It really is. Invite people, acknowledge their visits, and welcome them into the church by receiving new members. It couldn't be easier, but you have to make the effort to do those 3 things. Do those 3 things on a regular basis and make it a part of your ongoing church activities, and your church will grow and receive new members. Well, that's it for this week, but next week I'm going to talk about how to have special Sundays and why you should have lots of special Sundays. Again, if you find these videos helpful, click that little subscribe red button down there and you'll be able to know when the next videos are out there. And if you have questions or comments, click the questions or comments button or send me an email at steve@revstevep.com. Trying to keep these short and simple, give you some fundamental things to do, get you thinking about being the leader that God has called you to be and lead your church into the future. So that's it for this week on Coffee with Coach. See you next week.